सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। The topic of this class is the vision of the Upanishads. The word Upanishad itself reveals the vision. The word Upanishad itself reveals what Upanishad means, as well as the very vision of the Upanishads. And therefore I thought that we would like to demonstrate here what is the meaning of the word Upanishad and how it reveals its vision. So let us look at the analysis of how the word Upanishad is made in the first place. This word can be seen as having three elements, of which this is a noun, and nouns are usually derived from verbal stems. So the verbal stem or the root in this word Upanishad is sad. Actually the root is sad, S-A-D. However, because of the sandhi, this becomes shad. Thus we have this word Upanishad. Now, a noun is usually made by adding a certain suffix into the verbal stem or the verbal root. So, this upa and ni are prefixes added to this root sad. That's how this whole the whole verb rather, Upanishad is made. And to convert this verb into a noun, we must add some prefix. Here also a prefix is added. That prefix is a. In grammar, that is called quip. That particular prefix is called quip. And what it does is, it is added, but it disappears. So you add this which is quip suffix, it is added and it disappears, and therefore apparently we do not see any change in the verbal stem. But then what this suffix has done is, it has converted the verb into a noun. So Upanishad was a verb. By adding this suffix which is called quip, it is now and then it is added and it disappears, leaving the noun also of the same form, Upanishad. So Upanishad is a noun derived from this verb upa, ni and sad by adding this a or quip pratyaya, and so we have this noun Upanishad. Basically, Upanishad means knowledge. One characteristic of the quip pratyaya is, or the suffix is, that to whichever verbal stem it is added, it converts it into a noun, which noun has a sense of agency. That this verb, it does something. Sense of agency means it does something. So Upanishad is a noun in the sense that it does something. So now we have this Upanishad means knowledge. Knowledge is that which does something. It's called kartrutva. Okay, this is just a certain technical information. But the idea is that Upanishad is a noun derived from the original stem sat with the prefixes up and ni by adding a certain suffix called kvip, and the effect of that suffix is that it is added and then it disappears, therefore leaving the original root stem as it is, but it is now converted into a noun. And the characteristic of noun is that this thing does something. It is an agency. It is kartrutva. There is some doership or agency that it does something. So now Upanishad means knowledge which does something. What is the subject matter of knowledge? Upanishad is knowledge of what? Of whom? That is, the subject matter is revealed by this prefix upa, is in the sense of proximity. In Sanskrit, it would be called samipya. So this prefix upa is used to denote samipya, proximity, which is that Upanishad is the knowledge of something that is proximate. And the proximity without any qualification. So it is the proximate. And what is it that is the proximate? No? So we can say that this hall is nearer to me or more proximate than the trees outside. And my shirt here, this cloth is more proximate to me than this hall. And my body is more proximate to me than even this, my cloth. And my mind is even more proximate to me than even my body. And what is it that is most proximate to me is my own self. So, if is unqualified proximity. If proximity is qualified, then it may mean something that table is nearer than chair. But then, when proximity is not qualified, then it means that which is unqualified proximate, the most proximate. And it ultimately amounts to nothing but my own self. And therefore, Upanishad is a knowledge of that which is most proximate, meaning myself. And so Upanishad means self-knowledge. Self-knowledge. What kind of a knowledge? Swami, what is this self-knowledge? You mean knowledge about myself? I don't need to go to a teacher to know about myself because I know who I am. You ask me who I am, I'll be able to tell you. Who are you? Well, I'm a Swami, I'm so and so. Well, I'm happy, I'm unhappy, I'm talking right now, I'm listening, I'm eating, I'm drinking. And thus I can always tell you who I am. Yes, I can tell you who I am, except that there is no certainty about my knowledge about myself, because I find that my knowledge about myself keeps on changing. My own knowledge, my own perception, or my own judgment or conclusion about myself keeps on changing. In the morning you ask me, how are you, Swamiji? Very happy. In the afternoon you can ask me, how are you, Swamiji? All right. Okay, so. In the evening you can ask me, how are you? Don't ask me. And so sometimes I'm happy, sometimes I'm unhappy, sometimes I'm elated, sometimes I'm sad. And also depends on who is asking. If my son asks me, who are you? I'm a father. If my father asks me, who are you? I'm a son. So sometimes I am son, sometimes I am father, sometimes I am happy, sometimes I am unhappy, sometimes I am a speaker, sometimes I am a listener. And thus my own conclusion or my own understanding about myself keeps on changing constantly. And therefore, if I have to say, who am I? Can I say with certainty as to who I am? Today, I am not able to say with certainty who I am, because my understanding of who I am keeps on changing. And therefore, what we need is not merely the knowledge of self, but a certain knowledge of self. That is indicated by this prefix ni, which means a certain knowledge of myself. Nishchitam jnanam, very asserting or firm knowledge of myself. Meaning knowledge that does not suffer from any vagueness, does not suffer from lack of clarity, and a knowledge which is not subject to change, it is decided knowledge. This is what Upanishad means. That means, right now my idea about myself keeps on changing, but then that means that I have to know exactly who I am, because I cannot be I cannot be all of this. I cannot be happy also and unhappy also, a doer also, an enjoyer also, a speaker also, a hearer also, a father also and son also. All of these are no doubt knowledge about me, but then that I is known to me in a relative sense. But who am I when I am not related to something? So when I am related to you, then I look upon myself as teacher. When relating to my own teacher, I look upon myself as a student. When I am eating the food, I say I am an eater. When I am walking, I am a walker. And thus, all the understanding about myself is all relative. So I know myself all right, but know myself as related to something. But what am I when I am not related to anything? What am I by myself? Ramana Maharshi says in the Upadesha Ahamayam Koto Bhavati, where is this idea of I, that I keeps on changing, so where does it originate? So when this inquiry is made, then the true nature of I or the self is understood, and this is what the Upanishad does. Upanishad thus performs an inquiry into the nature of the self or nature of I, and helps us gain what we call a clear and firm understanding or firm knowledge of who I am. What does it matter? Does it matter? I seem to be quite happy with the way I know myself today. What is the need to bother about this or take the trouble to inquire into who I am? Even if suppose my understanding about myself is not right, what does it matter? Does it matter right now to me that I know myself as a human being, I know myself as successful, I know myself as non-successful, I know myself as a doctor or an engineer, or I know myself as father or son? Is it all right that I know myself in this manner? It would be all right if I was happy with that. Unfortunately, I find that I'm not happy with the way I find myself to be. And that's the reason why the need to inquire as to who I really am. If I was happy being a speaker, happy being a listener, happy being a doer, happy being an enjoyer, happy being whatever, then the Upanishad or this teaching would not be necessary. So this teaching is not necessary for, we have never seen this kind of assemblies among cows or buffaloes, that one buffalo is standing and giving a lecture over buffaloes and things like that. We never find that. Why? Because there is no need. So therefore we assume that a buffalo is happy being a buffalo. Or a cow is happy being a cow. Or we can say that all the creatures other than human beings seem to be happy being what they are, because they have no conflict with themselves. And I am not happy being what I am. And so even though I think that I know myself and I have various conclusions about myself, I am not happy with any conclusion at all. whether it is husband or wife, father or son, mother or daughter. Whatever I take myself to be, I am not happy because I find that every kind of a conclusion that I have of myself, I find myself a limited person, having all kinds of difficulties and limitations and problems. And therefore, I am not happy. So this is a problem with the human being, that the human being is not happy with himself or herself. And therefore, the need for this knowledge. So Upanishads give us what we call Nishchitam Jnanam, the certain or firm knowledge about the self. Alright, suppose I get such a knowledge about myself, what happens to me? What the Upanishad, vision of the Upanishad is very simple. What do the Upanishads tell me? What do they tell me about myself that I do not know? Well, Upanishads, as we said in the morning, the teaching of Upanishad or vision of Upanishads can be expressed in a very simple statement, in a very simple formula. Tat Tvamasi. That thou art. Oh, you are that. This is all that Upanishad. Really, this is the vision of the Upanishads expressed in one simple statement, that thou art, or you are that. We can also say that you are. That would be simpler. What is this that you are? That means that I am. And when the teacher says that you are, what is the response of the student? The student says, teacher says that you are, and the student responds, when he understands the meaning of the statement, he responds, I am Brahman, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. And so, that means, although it's written in not in the same order, but that means Brahman. So that means the statement says, you are Brahman. This is the vision of the Upanishads. You are Brahman. That's what the Upanishad teaches us. In short, Upanishads reveal a very important fact about me, that I is in fact Brahman. This is the great equation that the Upanishad reveals. I is Brahman. Now Swami, you are giving just adding another word, that's what you are doing. I am Brahman. But that's right. Again, when you look at this word Brahman, what does it mean? It means the big. Brahman means the big. How big? The bigness. Again, unqualified big. Because in bigness, if no qualification is added, no adjective is added, big means unqualified big. So unqualified big I am. But this is quite different from what I take myself to be, because one thing that I know is I am small. One thing I am certain about myself is I am small, and not only small, but I am an insignificant entity. And thus constantly I suffer from a complex of being insignificant. I don't really count in this world. What does it matter? Because the world was there before I was born. The world is continuing to be there, will continue to be there even I am not there. And even when I am there, so what does it matter? It does not matter sometimes whether I am there in the world. Sometimes it doesn't matter whether I am in a home also. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Let alone the world. In the family of a few people also, sometimes it doesn't matter whether I am there or not. And that's how I'm made to feel very often, And so, more often than not, I'm made to feel that I'm a small, insignificant entity which does not matter at all. And therefore, this is the kind of conclusion or understanding I have about myself there. I'm small, I'm limited. I'm limited in time because I was born at a certain time and I'm going to die at some other time. And therefore, I know that my existence is confined to a certain period of time. And therefore, I'm limited in time. I'm limited in place, and as much as I'm in one place and not in other places, and very often I feel that limitation also. Very often we feel the limitation in time because when my grandfather describes his wedding, how wonderful it was, how it went on for 7 days and what all was going on. So when a grandfather sometimes describes all these things to a little child, then the little grandson says, but grandfather, how come you did not call me at that time? How come you did not invite me? The fellow was not around. He wishes that he was there around, but he could not because limited in time. Or they talk of what is going to happen in the year 2030. Swami, do you know what is going to happen? You will have all kinds of, somebody told me, that you can go and shop for various limbs. You want the liver transplant, you want this transplant, you want that thing, all of that you can buy. I don't know how that's going to happen. But I know that I'm not going to be around in 2030, and therefore, I wonder very much, how will it be? So limitation of time also I feel, limitation of place also I feel, because when you watch on the TV, this Wimbledon game between the two sisters and so on, you wish sometimes that you were there, to feel that excitement. Because you are limited in one place and not in other place, and thus limitation of place, limitation of time, and of course limitation of my abilities is there. That my knowledge is very limited. I'm not a very highly informed, even if I'm highly informed in a certain subject matter, I find that my information extremely limited in other subject matters. Even little children, they know much more than I know, in many things. They give me lectures about different toys and different games and different computers and all kinds of things they tell me. So limited in knowledge, limited in my ability, limited in capacity to understand, capacity to express. Everywhere I only find myself a limited being. And again, as I said, if I was happy being limited, there would be no problem. A cow seems to be happy in being a cow, and a limited cow. It does not seem to be any problem at all, whereas I have a problem with me, because I see myself as a limited being. I cannot accept that sense of limitation of myself, and therefore, really, the problem that I have is basically problem with me. Even though I may say, Swamiji, I have a problem with this person. I have a problem with this. I have a problem with this food. I have a problem with this place. I think that I have a problem with many things outside of myself. But basically, all the problems that I have with things other than me, either whether they are the people or their situations or their places or whatever they are, the problems that I find I have with others basically originate from the fact that I have a problem with myself. And that problem is that I'm not happy with myself. I find myself a limited being, as I say, not only limited, an insignificant being, like a little speck in the whole realm of existence, and therefore I feel very bad that I don't count. Very often I find that I just don't count. It doesn't matter what I say or what I do, or whether I'm there or not, and I want to be counted. I want to be significant. I want to be important. I want to be important that people should ask me, they should seek my advice and they should follow my instructions. Very often I find nobody bothers. Swamiji says that this man has all the solutions, he has solutions to all the problems. Who the Prime Minister should be, what their policy should be, who the Finance Minister should be, what they should all do. He has solutions to all the problems except that nobody asks him. In his home they don't ask. Therefore the husband says that, well, there is an understanding between myself and my wife that she decides all little things and I decide all the important things. So she decides where the money will go and how it will be spent and what will be cooked and so forth. And I decide who the Prime Minister is going to be, who the Chief Minister is. That's what I decide. The rest of small things are decided by her. And therefore I find that there also I don't count. Doesn't matter, whatever it is. Even if I count, suppose, then so what? I'm never satisfied. I find that I'm never satisfied, even though I may be an important person. I may be a powerful person, but I'm never important enough, I'm never powerful enough, I'm never well known enough, I'm never wealthy enough, I'm never enough. And therefore, a sense of enoughness, a sense of satisfaction, a sense of self-acceptance very rarely happens in me. I find usually myself to be dissatisfied with myself, not accepting myself, not being able to even live with myself, not being able to face myself. And therefore I find that many of my activities are nothing but activities to escape from my own self. This man comes home in the evening after a hard day's work. He has come home because when he was at work, even though he leaves work at 5 o'clock, from 4:30 he was looking at his watch, when it is going to be 5 o'clock, and no sooner it's 5, he just gets up, he rushes out, takes his bus, goes to a subway, he pushes himself out the subway, runs to the bus stop, even though he may wait there for 20 minutes, but from here he must run. And thus he comes home to relax. But can he relax? He comes home, has a cup of coffee, sitting in his favorite rocking chair, sipping a cup of coffee, looking at the newspaper. For how many minutes? Just for a few minutes. And then he just leaves the newspaper aside, switches on the TV, watches it for a few minutes, not satisfied with that, takes up a telephone, calls his friend, conversation for a few minutes, not satisfied with that, ultimately is to get up, change into his tennis attire, whatever, go to a tennis, play, do something. But you just came home, why don't you relax, why don't you sit? Somebody tells him. He says, no. And so he must do some jogging, he must do some running, he must do some activity. The idea is that he just cannot sit quietly. I cannot sit quietly with me because I'm just not comfortable with me. When I sit quietly, I have to face myself. That's what happened in meditation. You know, that I'm required to face myself, and that's why there's the most uncomfortable time. And thus, I try to run away from myself. I try to run away from having to face myself. And therefore, various entertainments which are nothing but escape distractions. And therefore, human being is a problem. Nobody else has a problem. No other living being and no other creature has any problem with themselves. They seem to be quite satisfied with what they are. Swami, does it mean that are you recommending that we should become buffaloes and cows? No, I'm not recommending. In fact, somebody after listening to a talk said, Swamiji, from your talk I conclude that it's better to be a buffalo. I said, no. The reason why they seem to have no conflict with themselves is because of lack of sensitivity, that's all. They are just not sensitive to the fact, of the limitations they have and the helplessness that they have. They are not sensitive to that, and that's the reason why ignorance is bliss. They are blissfully ignorant. Whereas a human being is a much evolved, highly evolved being, and therefore evolution in terms of sensitivity. And therefore I am sensitive to myself, I am conscious of myself, and that's why this difficulty that I find myself to be a limited being and therefore not satisfied with myself. This I have a problem with myself, and therefore really I have to settle account with myself. If I settle account with myself, I think there will be no difficulty in settling account with the rest of the world. And when I have not settled account with myself, I have difficulty with everything in the world. Therefore, Upanishad in fact addresses that very fundamental difficulty that the human being has, and that is the difficulty or uneasiness or a discomfort with my own self. The problem of human being is that I'm uncomfortable with my own self. I'm not comfortable because I'm not happy with what I find myself to be, and therefore I do not accept myself. There is a self non-acceptance. I do not accept myself. And that's the reason why all this inquiry is to, what's the reason for the non-acceptance? What's the reason why I'm not happy with myself? Swami, you just told us that I'm a limited being and therefore I'm not happy. But what's wrong with being limited? What is wrong with being limited in my capacity, limited in my knowledge, limited in my power, limited in my influence? What is wrong with that? Somehow I cannot accept it. How come I cannot accept being limited? The general rule is that everything is comfortable with what they are. As we say, the fire is comfortable being hot, the sun is comfortable being bright, everything is comfortable with what it is. The discomfort comes when only I am separated from my true nature. That is when the discomfort comes. The water is very comfortable in being ocean. In the ocean, the water is comfortable, nowhere to go. It is very relaxed, tranquil, happy. But because of the heat of the sun, when that water evaporates, turns into a cloud, and then it falls someplace as rain, somewhere in the mountain, and then it gets separated from its true nature, then it becomes restless, and then it wants to get back to its source. So we find the activity, we find the restlessness when something is deviated from its nature. There is no activity, there is no restlessness at all when something abides in its own nature. No conflict, no discomfort, no unhappiness, no non-acceptance when something abides in its own nature. This discomfort comes when something is separated from its nature. I'm uncomfortable with myself. Perhaps that shows that maybe the self that I think I am is not what I really am. Because had I been really limited, I would have no problem in being limited. If being limited was my nature, then I would have had no difficulty in accepting the limitation. As you said, this is a general rule, that a thing has no difficulty in accepting its own nature. The difficulty comes when I am deviated from my own nature. Like the example they normally give, water has no difficulty in being cold because coolness is the nature of water. It's only when we heat the water becomes hot, then it is a problem with itself because it cannot accept itself, it finds itself hot, which is unnatural for water, and therefore a struggle begins. And water struggles to give up that heat and become cold. And when water becomes cold, comes to the ambient temperature, and then it is comfortable. All the struggle has come to an end. So we find a lot of struggle in our life. On account of the fact that I am not comfortable with myself, therefore I struggle with myself, and I constantly want to change so that I can become comfortable with myself. And so whatever promises me that will make me, offer me that comfort, so that is what I try to acquire, or that's what I try to become. If I think that I am lacking in money, and maybe by acquiring more money that I think I will be alright, well, that's what I do. Not that I am interested in money at all. Really, human being is not interested in anything. But he's a selfish creature. Not, I think that I'm interested in money, I think I'm interested in wealth, name, fame, comfort, friends, company. Really speaking, person is not interested in anything. You know what he's interested in? What do you think is a human being primarily interested in? What do you think?
Himself.
In himself. Does it not sound selfish? That basically I am interested in myself. When do I become interested in a friend? When do I become interested in a house? When do I become interested in anything? When do I become interested in something? Tell me.
When it makes you me.
Makes us happy. We think it makes us
When
happy.
it's mine.
When it becomes mine?
Because it's an extension of who we think we are.
When, as you said, I would be interested in something or somebody when it makes me comfortable with myself. Primarily, I am interested in myself. And therefore, I am seeking to be comfortable with myself. That's all I am seeking. That is what we call happiness. When am I happy? When I am comfortable with myself. When I am accepting of myself. When I am, that is when I say that I am happy with myself. And that's all that I am interested in. When do I become interested in someone else or something else? that helps me in being comfortable with myself. Is it not interesting? I like this chair. When? When the chair makes me feel comfortable with myself. If the chair is not comfortable, I give it up or I get up from there. I'm interested in a certain shirt, in certain clothes, whatever, because they make me feel comfortable with myself. If they don't, I remove them, I change them. So really speaking, we have a very selfish or self-centered relationship in that sense with everybody. And that's the reason why, how long does a relationship last? As long as the one I'm related to makes me or helps me become comfortable with myself. Or at least doesn't make me uncomfortable with myself. At least doesn't create an atmosphere that I cannot tolerate myself. In fact, when I cannot tolerate somebody else, in reality, it is I cannot tolerate myself. I think that this person is responsible for that, and therefore I cannot tolerate that person. What that person does is, it pushes some button and I guess invokes something from me, some aspect of me with which I am not comfortable. For example, when somebody criticizes me, I don't like it. Why do I not like it? Because when the person criticizes me, it really creates a doubt in me whether maybe what he says is right. Like the example that we gave, a course was going on for 1 month. The Vedanta discourse was given for 1 month, morning and evening. And the only thing that a Vedantic teacher teaches is that you are Brahman. That's all there is teaching. That you are unqualified being, you are limitless, you are ever free. This discourse are going on for 1 month, morning and evening. Towards the end of the discourses, one person from the audience, one sought interview with the Swamiji, with the speaker. Swamiji, can I see you personally? He says, yes, come to me at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. This man comes to Swamiji, says, what's the matter? You don't seem to be happy, you seem unhappy, you are upset. What is it that has made you upset? Swamiji, you know what happened to me 2 nights ago? After the evening talk was concluded, we all went out. And of course we leave our shoes out there when we enter the hall. And he says, I went out to the lecture hall. I put on my shoes and I was just walking away to my home and somebody came from behind and caught hold of me and said, are you blind? Swami, he called me blind. So what happened? You are stealing my shoes? Then I realized that I had inadvertently put on somebody else's shoes. It happened that he was wearing a similar pair of shoes, except that this pair of shoes was new and mine was somewhat old, and therefore that fellow accused me that I was I was stealing his pair of shoes which are new. Swamiji, for 5 minutes he kept on accusing me, abusing me. He called me thief and he called me liar and all kinds of things. That's it, I'm upset. I could not sleep for the whole night. I could not sleep last night also, and never had to seek your interview. What should I do? So Swamiji tells him, look, for 1 month, in the morning and evening, I am telling you that you are Brahman, you are Brahman, you are Brahman. That has not touched you at all. And this person just told you once or twice that you are a thief, and you are so upset. Because when I am told Brahman, I am limitless, the things seem to touch me. But when somebody says you are a thief, you are a liar, you are so and so, that seems to immediately touch me. I think that maybe he is right. And therefore, that person makes me, he is successful in creating this complex in me that maybe I am a thief or I am a liar, which is what I think I am perhaps, and that's the reason why when I become uncomfortable with that person, it is because that person manages to make me uncomfortable with myself. That's when I get hurt, that's when I get insulted. When I am uncomfortable or non-accepting or unhappy with my own self. So we should know that the primary problem that I have is a problem with my own self. Unfortunately, We keep that thing intact and try to solve all of the problems. And so people change their jobs, they change their houses, they change their motor cars, they even change their friends, they change all kinds of things they do. Hoping that that change will be able to bring about a condition when he can, when he can be comfortable. But not changing, this very perception of oneself. So Upanishad says that what needs to be changed really is my perception of my own self, and that the perception that I have today about myself is not the right perception, is the wrong perception. And therefore, Upanishads give us the right perception about our own self. And what is that? That you are Brahman. You are in fact limitless. You are free from every form of limitation. You are not an insignificant creature. In fact, you are the most significant. Now, of course, Upanishad doesn't simply make the statement and stop there. It explains what is meant by that. Upanishad understands that I am an insignificant creature. It's not that it is simply because I am told that I am significant that I have become insignificant, but it is said that you are significant, but you take yourself to be insignificant. There is some problem, very fundamental problem, and that is the perception of I have about myself is not the right perception, it's a distorted perception. Otherwise, they say, if being limited or being insignificant was a reality of myself, I would have had no problem with that. But I have problem with my own self. Which self? The limited self, or an insignificant self, and that shows that it cannot be a reality of me. This one thing also we can be very clear about. Whenever something makes me happy, or whenever I find that I am happy, number one, I am happy because of my own self. Even though someone did something, someone managed to touch something here which invoked a certain aspect of me, seeing which I am unhappy. So whenever I feel unhappy, number one, I am always unhappy with myself and because of myself, and somebody merely becomes a catalyst or instrumental in creating that self in me with which I am not comfortable. And secondly, that I am unhappy with myself, is it that the I is of the nature which is worth being unhappy about? Then I find myself limited being. Is it the reality of me? Upanishads say no, that is not the reality about yourself. Even though you think that you are a limited being, that is not a reality or not a fact about you. You think that you are an insignificant creature, well, that is not a reality about you. How that is so? That is subject matter of Upanishad. This is what Upanishad reveals, the true nature of myself. For the simple reason that I am not happy or accepting of what I find myself to be. And I find myself a limited person, which sense of limitation is not a reality about me. As I said, had it been a reality, I would have been comfortable with it. But I am not comfortable with myself because I have a wrong or a distorted perception of myself. And Upanishads give us the right perception of who I am. And that's the reason why this upa, the knowledge of the self, becomes most important, because it is the wrong perception of self which is the cause of all the unhappiness or all the sadness and all the conflicts and all the stresses. If you want to manage your stresses, or manage a conflict, or manage unhappiness, the ultimate solution is here in discovering the true nature of myself. That is when all the stresses and all the conflicts and all the unhappiness and all the sadness can go. And until then, it will not go. It can go, largely you can eliminate them, but one can never totally eliminate this unhappiness or sadness about oneself unless the true knowledge of the self takes place. And so, to impart the true knowledge of the self is then the purpose of the Upanishad. And as I said, this is what the Upanishads reveal about myself. You are Brahman. You are limitless. You are what you like to be. What do I like to be? Really, I like to be limitless. I like to see myself as free from every limitation. Because I and limitation, these two things cannot go together. Somewhere else the limitation can be no problem. But when I put these two in the same adhikaranam, when I is equal to limited, there is something that is not acceptable to me. But Swami, that's a fact about me. How can our Upanishads change the fact? How can the Upanishads change the fact that I am a limited person? You think that just because I study the Upanishads, then I will not die? You say that at the moment I am limited in time because I am subject to birth and death. If I gain the self-knowledge, does it mean that now I will become free from birth and death? Right now, Swami, have a problem with languages, I know only one language, my mother tongue. I have problem with other languages. Then when I gain this knowledge, does it mean that this problem will go away? That I will become all knowledge and therefore I will know everything? So these are the realities of me. How can Upanishads also change the realities? See, knowledge cannot change the reality. Knowledge only can reveal the truth. Just as a light cannot actually create anything, all the light can do is to dispel darkness. And by dispelling darkness, well, whatever problems darkness created, they can go away. But coming in of light cannot create something new. If when we switch on the light and find a couch being there, it's not that the light has created the couch was already there, light has simply brought it to manifestation. Similarly also, Upanishads cannot change the nature of myself. Then how can they remove this limitation? Limitation in time, limitation in place, limitation in knowledge, limitation in ability, limitation in power. Will these limitations go away? The answer is no. I is equal to limited. That's what I'm saying right now. That is limited. That is something that is limited in time and place and conditions. Yes, these limitations are there, only that those limitations do not belong to I. There is something happening in my life or something happening with me that somehow I seem to lump the two things together which do not belong in the same locus. Two things belonging to the same locus and two things belonging to different locus. Right now for me, when I say I am limited, then I and limited are in the same locus. Upanishad says that they are not in the same locus. In fact, they are in different locus. Those of you who may have heard this term, samanadhikaranyam, samanadhikaranam. Samanam is the same, adhikaranam is the locus. Samanadhikaranyam, the fact of being in the same locus. So right now our problem is that we find these two being in the same locus, I and limited. Upanishad will teach us, Upanishad teaches us that no, they are in fact not in the same locus. The limitations are there, but that the limitations do not belong to I. There is a limitation in time. There is limitation in place. Every kind of limitation is there. In fact, insignificance is there, except that the insignificance does not belong to the I. It belongs somewhere else and is thought to belong to I. So yes, there is limitation in time. But then the limitation in time, place, etc. obtained somewhere else, and then, however, it is thought to belong to I. And that is how the problems come. So this phenomenon there is a phenomenon called superimposition or identification. Superimposition means superimposing or imposing what belongs to one place, imposing it on the other. This also is an experience that very often happens in our day-to-day life. While watching a movie, for example, this kind of an experience sometimes happens that I get so absorbed in watching the movie And I get so identified with the one who is acting there in the movie that I start, displaying the same kind of moods that that person has there. Even watching this tennis, there are two sisters who are playing with each other, and you just take liking to one of them, for whatever reason. You take liking to the younger one, I don't know, for whatever reason. And then, when she really scores a point, I jump with joy here, I have scored a point. And then she misses that, fall, double fall, whatever it is, and then she loses a point, and the opponent scores a point, as though I have lost something. Does it not happen to us? Well, I'm rooting for this team and I'm rooting for some other team. This rooting business is what? Identification. So when you live in New York, then you are identified New York Giants or New York Mets or New York Yankees or whatever your team may be. When they go to Los Angeles, then as though you are fighting with somebody. You are playing there because of identification. In fact, everywhere in the country, even in countries like India also, at the end of the cricket game, there can be sometimes all kinds of problems, because if India lost to some team, and then the audience gets really upset and they start throwing all kinds of things, just because of they feel they have lost. They have not lost. One team has lost. But I feel that I have lost. Our country wins, we feel that. So one team wins, we feel that we have won. So these are all kinds of experiences where what happens in one place is superimposed upon another place, and therefore it is our experience also that we feel the pleasure and pain, in fact, which belongs somewhere else. We feel a sense of loss or defeat, which loss or defeat belongs somewhere else. Or very often we feel successful, whereas success belongs to something else. I can hardly lift a rocket. I don't even know how to hold the tennis racket, let alone returning or doing it, making a shot. I have no knowledge and no skill of any kind. And still I feel that I won the tennis match, I lost the tennis match. So just because the feeling of win or lose is created in me does not mean that there is a genuine reason for it. That can be due to the fact that maybe I got identified with something. And therefore, the superimposition, what happens in one place is superimposed upon the other. And therefore, we start feeling or experiencing what in fact belongs elsewhere. So this is called different locus. Who am I? I am a spectator. Where is the win or loss? Somewhere in Wimbledon, somewhere else. But that win or loss which is there is superimposed upon I, and I feel that I am victorious or I am a failure. And then I experience I gain the experience or I feel the experience of success or failure, which in fact the thing doesn't belong to me at all. And therefore, just because I feel successful doesn't mean that I have got to be successful. Or just because I feel a failure doesn't mean that I have to be a failure. This is most important. Just because I feel something about myself does not mean that it has to be so. So this is where our attention is drawn about the various conclusions we have about ourselves, the various complexes that we entertain about ourselves. Upanishad, in fact, draws our attention to these various conclusions and complexes about our own self and invites us to analyze them. Whether do we have any valid reason to conclude what we conclude about ourselves? Do we have valid reason to feel the way I feel about myself? We find that we do not have a valid reason. In fact, whatever we feel, all that feeling of limitation that we have about ourselves is not the reality about ourselves, but it comes on account of equating myself with something that I am not. So when I equate myself with a given player, then I gain experiences of win and loss. And similarly also in my life, I am equating myself with something which I am not. And therefore, whatever belongs to what I equate with is what I feel belongs to me. In fact, it does not. And therefore, there is a fundamental problem in the human life. There's a problem with everybody, all living beings. But as I said, all living beings have no problem in accepting the sense of limitation about themselves because they're not sensitive. Whereas human being has a big problem in accepting a sense of limitation for himself or herself, except that this sense of limitation is not the reality about me, it is on account of equating myself with what I am not. So some equation is going on in our life. And therefore, a new equation is required, that's all. Although all that the Upanishads do is give us another equation about our life, which is a reality about ourselves. The equation that obtains right now in our life is not the reality about ourselves. And so there is process of what we call de-identification. What obtains right now is identification, superimposition, when what is required is de-identification or de-superimposition, and that is what Upanishad teaches us both ways. Number one, it gives us the right perception of what I am, and secondly, it also tells us the process by which that can be done. So Upanishads or the Vedanta gives us both the vision as well as the way. It gives us the end as well as the means. The most important thing is the vision. Once we have the right vision, once we have the right perception, and then of course, then all our priorities, all our values, everything, they become clear, they become, very organized, and then I can live a life in order to make that vision a reality about me. First is to get the right vision, and second is to do whatever is required to be done in order to make that vision a reality for me. Merely vision is not enough, but then I must do whatever is necessary to make that vision a reality. So this is basically what Upanishads do, give me a true perception of myself, a true vision of myself. Of course, I am a product of the world. I am also related to the world. I am related to God. And therefore, gaining the true perception of myself also requires me to gain a true perception of the world. It also requires to gain a true perception of God. That is why we find that Upanishad in fact addresses all these three aspects of our life. Our life consists of I the individual, the world with which I interact, and God who has created the world, and therefore it is necessary to have the right perception about all these three, the I, the world, and the God. And therefore that becomes the subject matter of the Upanishad. Even though the primary subject matter of the Upanishad is self, but to understand any one thing belonging to the system, we must know the whole system. And since the self is a part of this whole universe, therefore it is also necessary to understand what the nature of the universe is. And the nature of the universe can be understood only when we understand who is the creator of the universe. What's the nature of creator? That will enable us to understand what's the nature of the universe, and that will also enable to understand what's the nature of I. So even though I, or the self, is the primary subject of Upanishads, we also find Upanishads talking about the universe, talking about creation. We find Upanishads talking about the very cause of the creation, about the creator, about God. All of these are also very beautifully covered by the Upanishads. Jiva, Jagat and Ishvara. The self, the world and God. So these three then become the focus of inquiry of the Upanishads. Okay. So we'll stop here this morning and we'll continue this tomorrow.